From steering innovation in satellite communications to now shaping the future of space governance on a global stage, she is a leader, a visionary, and a voice for international cooperation beyond Earth's boundaries. Meet Ms. Aarti Holla-Maini, the Director of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. At the helm of UNOOSA, she champions access to space for developing countries, promotes responsible space exploration, and leads the charge on using space technology to advance the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. A global citizen with Indian roots and a European perspective, Ms. Holla-Maini is not just navigating orbits. She's redefining the future of humanity's place in the cosmos.
Welcome, Aarti, to the podcast. The series is called Women of Space, and it is indeed my pleasure that I'm talking to somebody who has her roots and origin from India. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here.
All right. I was just reading about your journey, and you have an incredible journey, and now your role as the director of UNOOSA. I would want to know, what was that moment or that trigger or that thing that made you interest in space and global policy?
I have to tell you, Akansha, I'm not one of these people who, when they were young, used to sit and look at the skies and think, oh, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to study astronomy, or I love the space and all of that. Not at all. I fell into the space industry. I do apologize, I'm slightly ill, so I'm a bit croaky. But I qualified as a lawyer in the UK as a solicitor, and I had studied law with German law. But I very quickly discovered that I really didn't want to work in a law firm. So I'd applied for an MBA, and not actually knowing what an MBA was for, what it was good for, why I should do it. I just knew I needed to do something different. So I happened to be flicking through The Economist, and I saw this bilingual MBA just outside Paris. And it was one that focused on culture and more soft skills. At least that's the impression I had. So I thought, hey, that could be something for me. I applied for it, and when I applied for it, they said to me that I had succeeded in all of the entrance exams, the essays, and the interviews, and all of this stuff. But they would really advise me to think twice before accepting the offer, because they feared that I would be one of the people who would be waiting the longest to find a job after the MBA. They didn't really have faith in me. I only had 2 years of work experience as a solicitor in the UK. And so they were concerned, and they were being transparent. So, but for me, on my side, I'd already decided, no, I want to do this. So I did it. We started the MBA in, I think it was September. And in October, there was a careers fair where German companies came to campus. And I had put my CV in German, and I was interviewed by Mercedes-Benz and Daimler-Benz Aerospace. I didn't know what was Daimler-Benz Aerospace, but they invited me for an assessment center to Munich. I went there. That was 3 days of, exercises with psychologists watching you, games, quizzes, interviews, and so on. And I learned what was aerospace while I was there. And by day 3 of the assessment center, I thought, this is actually really cool. And they offered me a job. And because the MBA school had put the fear of God in me that I would never find a job, I said yes, because I didn't know what else might or might not come my way. So that was my entry into the space sector. I worked, first of all, on satellites, on satellite navigation systems, the precursor, what would become Galileo at the time. And I moved to Germany. I moved to Munich. So that's how I got in the space sector. And after 3.5 years in Munich, I went to Brussels to work on the European satellite navigation system Galileo. After 4 years, they called me back to Munich. I was no longer going to go because I was married to a civil servant who worked for the European Commission. And I moved from the satellite manufacturer. Daimler-Benz Aerospace was by then Astrium, which is today part of the Airbus group. And I moved from the manufacturer side to the satellite operations side and became Secretary General of a trade association. So that's where my journey in space began. So not by design, more by accident. We're Indian. We don't believe in accidents. Everything is, fate. It was meant to be. So here we are.
So actually, you did not choose space. Space chose you.
Yeah,
Space actually, universe actually chose you.
that's it. We
Wonderful.
found each other. We found each other.
Oh,
Stars
yes.
aligned.
Stars aligned.
Yeah.
Very rightly said. A few years ago, if you would say space superpowers, then it would usually be US and Russia. But now there are a lot of private players coming in, emerging in, and there are emerging economies. How UNOOSA is fostering inclusivity in space. And when I talk about inclusivity, not only in terms of all the sectors, but also in terms of gender inclusivity.
Sure. So that's a big question. First of all, I think it's important to know that as the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs, we are all about an inclusive approach, making sure that countries, whether they are spacefaring or not, play a role, that their voice is heard. Space governance, for example, is not just about the spacefaring nations. It's absolutely about all nations, especially those who rely on satellite imagery and space services alongside. So for us, it is right that all UN member states should sit at an equal level, as they do in COPUS, the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, to which we are secretariat. But you asked, how do we foster inclusivity? First of all, we are right now, we have 104 nations who are members of the committee. We are reaching out to the other United Nations member states who are not yet members of the committee and encouraging them to become members, because we believe that every country is using satellite services and space services and technology in some way or other, and everybody's voice should be heard. So we're encouraging membership. Secondly, we have an Access to Space for All program, which is really about giving access to space to countries, communities who are not yet spacefaring. We have helped 4 or 5 countries like Kenya, Moldova, Guatemala, Mauritius launch their very first satellites. And we see, by enabling this kind of access, we can really transform an ecosystems. Let me give you the example of Kenya. Kenya won the competition to launch their first satellite on KiboCube, which is a Japanese module of the International Space Station. So UNOOSA has a partnership with the Japanese Space Agency, JAXA. Kenya won that competition in, I think it was 2018. They launched their very first satellite with them. As a result of this, there was momentum generated in the country so that they established the Kenyan Space Agency. They registered their satellite with the United Nations. It's a treaty obligation. And it's because of working with us, we were able to inform and support them, train them on what they need to do to become a responsible spacefaring nation. So they registered their satellite. They subsequently went on to stimulate STEM in their country and start building their own, so their indigenous second satellite. And in the same week that launched, that was in 2023, we, UNOOSA, carried out a technical advisory mission on space law with Kenya, and we supported them in finalizing their space law. So you have a country which was not spacefaring, which has become a responsible spacefaring nation, which has now a space agency, has a space law, and so on. So this is a great example of how UNOOSA can foster inclusivity in terms of emerging economies and putting them, at the same level in terms of being spacefaring, being responsible, having a voice in space governance alongside existing spacefaring nations. But your question, I think, went broader. You asked about promoting gender diversity as well.
Exactly,
So,
gender diversity and inclusivity.
Exactly.
The series is majorly concentrating on women of space. So we also want to highlight the factor.
Yeah. So we have a Space for Women project in the office. Surprisingly, Akansha, this started with Korea approaching UNOOSA, saying, Republic of Korea, saying, we want to increase the number of women in the space sector in Korea. how can we do that? And can we work with UNOOSA somehow? So this is where the Space for Women project was, I understand, born. And it started with Korea funding a study looking at how many women were in the space sector in Korea. And by working with us, doing that study, they managed to, I think, at least double or significantly increase the number of women in their space sector. They then carried on working with us and they said, would it be interesting to fund a global study? They did that, and that study revealed that right now in the space sector globally, maybe 30% of employees are women. And if you look at the leadership level, it's obviously even less. So you can find the results of that study on the UNOOSA website. If you just Google Space for Women project, you can look at that. Canada came in last year as well, and they worked with us to produce a gender mainstreaming toolkit, which is really designed to give practical suggestions to space organizations of how can they promote more women in space. Look at, for example, the UK. If you look at the UK Space Agency, the deputy CEO of the Space Agency is a job share. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but a job share means that two people would share a job. So you have a man and a woman who are both deputy CEO of the UK Space Agency. Similarly, if you look at the head of space in the UK department in charge of space, DCIT, the head role there is also a job share. And there you have two women who are playing that leading role. Why? This enables women to play leading roles. You're promoting more people in one role, one leadership role, but allows them to also balance their lifestyle as well, right? So this is a practical example that space organizations could look at to promote how to get more women into leadership roles. Yeah. So we did the study, as I said, the global study, very, very interesting results. It breaks it down by region. It looks at Africa, it looks at Europe, it looks at Asia, and looks at how are we doing in the space sector at large. Then we have this toolkit. I myself am an international gender champion. So the United Nations is really good in the sense that whenever we have a job opening, whenever we recruit, HR puts obligations on us to make sure that there's geographical, gender, and all kinds of diversity. They are constantly emailing the different offices of the UN to say, your office is lacking in, I don't know, APAC region or this gender. Actually, we are more women than men in our office. So we are counterintuitive, if you will. But the UN by design will hold us accountable on this point. So if we have shortlisted X number of candidates and there's not enough significant gender balance, they will go back and they'll say, not enough, look again at the list. Right? So it's built into the UN by design. The space sector doesn't have that. And I think we do need more pressure on the space sector to look more seriously at this issue. I personally never paid that much attention to this issue. It became fashionable some years ago to say that you were a feminist. I never used to say that I was a feminist, and I don't like to be forced into these things because it's fashionable or politically correct to do so. Meanwhile, I have learned the value of doing this. And I have realized that it is important and it needs to be done by design. And that was a learning process for me. What else can I tell you? Our Space for Women project. One of my personal problems with this project was it seemed to be a first world. We seem to be looking at it from a first world perspective. Like, how do we get more women into leadership positions? How do we get more women into space? For me, we're the UN. We care about the Sustainable Development Goals. We care about transforming lives at a grassroots level. So last year, we took our Space for Women project to Africa. We did it in Kenya. There's a United Nations office in Kenya. So we hosted it there. We made a point of bringing a lot more African countries to the table. And we also had men from Costa Rica, from Kenya, from other places, a handful only, unfortunately, but we had some men around the table. And the core topic was, how do we get more young girls into education and then also into STEM education? How do we bring STEM education to marginalized communities, to poor areas where education is a problem per se? Yeah, and how do we leverage space to connect the unconnected with a focus on education? Yeah, so that was a step change, which made our Space for Women project that we have as an office also a little bit closer to my heart, so I could really embrace it from both perspectives, not just a first world perspective, but also the grassroots perspective.
Wonderful. There were certain really nice case study and examples and some nice insights. Although I'm not from the space industry, but as a woman and as per se, when you go out and explore the world, the learnings are great. You talked about the grassroots level and changing people's life and how it impacts and affects. My next question is that could you share some success stories or a story where space application has made a real difference in people's life?
Yeah.
Especially, you've been talking about developing countries, so we'll continue with developing countries. And here, the story that we would like to listen to is that somebody like me who is not from space industry can also understand and that gives us an understanding that why space research and space industry, the emerging space industry, is important.
Easy. I love telling these stories. I'm going to tell you two stories.
Uh,
One is, I keep going back to Kenya. It just happens to be the case. So why did I want to take Space for Women to Kenya and education focus? Because Kenya has connected, this is already like 10, 12 years ago. Kenya connected 245 rural schools across 4 communities, 4 out of like 70 communities. So not very many, but 245 schools. It was with UK development aid at the time, and the development aid was targeting marginalized girls. Okay, so at the outset of that project, it was focusing on girls. Meanwhile, it's become more holistic, it's for all children. But what they did was they connected those schools and they partnered with a content provider called MathsWiz. No, Wiz Education, Wiz Education. Wiz Education is a UK company which has, or an NGO, and one of their programs is Maths Wiz. And they saw that by giving these children access to 1 hour per week of this online maths program, so it's tailored to the children. Imagine your child goes online, it's like gaming, right? They get a maths game. They click, they get answers, maybe they get half of them wrong. So the program will make them do the same level again. And it will only go up to the next level based on the child's development and ability to go to the next level, right? So this is what this Maths Whiz program was doing in these unconnected schools, which have now been connected by satellite, by space technology. Yeah, so it's all about the digital divide: terrestrial infrastructure, fiber, 4G, 3G, 4G, 5G. You know, when you go out to villages in the developing world, there is no connectivity. It's a real digital divide. But you can bring satellite connectivity out there, put a dish on the roof of the school, connect to the internet backbone immediately without having to wait for terrestrial infrastructure and towers to be built, which are very expensive, which maybe there is less return on investment for the Geos of the world or the Reliance and Vodafones of the world, right? So with satellite, you can bring internet connectivity immediately. So that's what happened with these schools. And as I said, by enabling that internet access, by connecting to this MathsWiz program, they measured that over the space of 12 months, the learning age of those kids with 1 hour per week, which is nothing. Which, I mean, when you think about kids these days, you think you'd get away with giving a kid access to internet 1 hour a week. There would be havoc, right? That doesn't fly. But in these areas, man, that 1 hour, they would look forward to it. And over 12 months, the learning age had increased by 18 months for those kids. Yeah. So you can see the transformational power of satellite connectivity to change people's lives. Yeah. Now that it's quite a moving case study, because That was a pilot project funded by UK Development Aid, but the funding ran out after 6 or 7 years. It ran out. The CEO of the UK satellite operator, Avanti Communications, he said, Aarti, I can't walk away from those schools. I mean, kids who've had access to this, what are you going to do? Take the dishes off and walk away? You can't do that, right? So that became a corporate social responsibility project for that company, and it remains so until today. The company has spread. I think they're also trying to do this now in Congo and in Nigeria. Those conversations are happening. The curious thing is, every government that hears about this project, especially in Africa, they're like, we want that in our country. How can we scale it? Yet the satellite operator is still struggling to make it sustainable. But you asked for an inspiring story. That's one of them. Let me give you another one. The tsunami, which many people these days are not aware of, the big tsunami that hit was it in 2004 or 2006? I don't remember exactly. But the big tsunami that hit Indonesia and Asia, really big, some 20 years ago. I can't believe it's 20 years ago. As you may know, it wiped out fishermen's communities. It really hit coastal communities really, really hard. There are many great stories that were born of this. One of them is the Friendship Foundation, Friendship NGO, which has floating hospitals. Again, ships which have satellite connectivity on them, and they are going. There's a beautiful image of. I wish I could share my screen and show you this image, but there's an image of this Friendship floating hospital going across the fjords of Bangladesh. Right, Bangladesh is susceptible to flooding all the time. They were really hit badly by the tsunami, and this ship goes to these coastal communities, and it goes there a couple of times a year and provides those communities with regular healthcare. So people who would never have access to a GP or to healthcare, who may suffer from diseases that might never be diagnosed, let alone have the privilege of seeing the same doctor twice. Yeah. So you and I will go to a doctor. The doctor may know us. We might have a regular GP who knows about how we are, and we may go from year to year or from 6 months to 6 months. Hey, doctor, I'm ill again. Oh, you were ill last time. How are you doing now? The follow-up, everything that is normal that we take for granted. Imagine these coastal communities don't have that. But they do now. They do now. I mean, I'm not constantly in touch with Friendship to know how it's going, but they did come to the UN last November. They presented to the ambassadors here in Vienna, talking about this kind of a case study. Again, transformational, thanks to the power of space and the reach of space technologies. Yeah. So that was just a couple of examples that maybe inspire you of how the digital divide, the data divide can be addressed using space, and how it can really make a difference to people's ordinary lives and everyday lives. We think of space as being outer space, far away, the moon, the Mars, Venus, blah, blah, blah. How is that relevant? That's a niche, that's a nice to have. When people are dying here on Earth, why should we care about space? You should care. You should care, because if we hadn't have seen it from space, we wouldn't know there was a climate crisis. When emergencies happen, when there is an earthquake, when there is a tsunami, when there is any kind of disaster, a natural disaster on Earth, communications are knocked out. We need information. We need real-time information. We need maps. We need to see where have bridges been broken, for aid to go from A to B. Maybe you need to cross a river. Maybe you need to cross a lagoon. Maybe how do you reach people? You need to see images of the before and the after. You can do that with space. And we do that with space. When terrestrial towers, communications towers break down, your mobile phone, it doesn't work anymore because there is no mobile network. It was destroyed. Satellite phones can be flown in immediately. Portable terminals, plug and play, can be flown in. They can use solar power to be powered. You can enable communications. You can enable first responders to be connected with each other. UN, like UNDP, World Food Program, when they fly in to provide relief, they connect with their HQ using satellite equipment because the communications are there. The imagery is there. Right? So this is why we care about space.
Absolutely. And I think I never thought of the word digital divide because I literally live in a world where we see first world problems. I'm from the privileged category.
There you
I
go.
never thought that way that there is another division that's called digital divide.
Yeah.
All right. Going back to the core of the series, as a women leader in this industry, what advice you would give to the young girls aspiring to work in space related field? And like you have categorically mentioned that space is not just about sun, moon, Mars, and Venus. It is much more than that, which is absolutely enlightening for me also, because even I also used to think more or less I'm quite an aware person, aware individual, but this is really bringing a lot of insights. So to women, in fact, women like me or maybe my daughter who have got no idea, but if they are given this perspective of space, what is the route that they can take, or what are the simple steps that you can
The
suggest?
first thing I would say is don't think that if you're not an engineer or STEM person that you can't work in space. I'm not. My predecessors, the former directors of UNOOSA, were always astrophysicists or this kind of really smart, intellectually smart stuff. My skills are soft skills, right? I can't do maths. I don't know anything about physics and all of this. I mean, some people sometimes think I'm an engineer. That's nice, but that's flattering for me. But no, I'm really not. But you can come into this industry with any skill set, whether you're a musician, whether you're an artist, whether you are a linguist or a social scientist, or in lawyer, obviously. You don't have to have a STEM and a space background to work in space. Inform yourself about it. Look for any opportunity. Look for any opportunity to connect with the space sector. Look at jobs in the space sector. There are many. Whether you get into a space company from an HR route or a marketing route or a communications route or any route at all, get in. If you want to work in the space sector, find any route to connect with that sector. Also, there are many things like the SSPI, the Society of Satellite Professionals International, and they have a women's group. They have chapters all around the world. Connect with clubs and networks that are out there. Google them, look for them, and connect with them. But I think for me, the most important thing is advice I would give to any young person is know what inspires or motivates you. Look at what you are good at and focus on what you are good at, and then look for opportunities and seize them. And don't I'm never confident. I'm still not confident in so many ways, but I have multiple examples of where people were concerned. I wouldn't say didn't have faith in me, but were concerned. The MBA example, right? It's not that they didn't have faith in me. They were concerned because I had only 2 years of work experience. It was the same thing when I applied for this job. I knew I was in the top 5, but people called me and told me, people who I thought were in the know, they said, you're not the preferred candidate. You're not likely to get it. They want a space lawyer. You're not a space lawyer. They want this, they want that. How many times in my career have I received very clear messages that this is not going to happen? Yeah. But for whatever reason, I have been, I've just decided that this is what I want to do, and I've stuck with it, right? You just need to make your decisions, work hard and be sincere. Be sincere about what you're good at, and own your abilities and own your faults. I mean, I'll tell you very openly that I'm not a scientist. I'm not particularly well read in these fields. I can't do maths. I will own my weaknesses, but I will also own my strengths, and create opportunities and let the world unfold for you. Because if you're sincere and you work hard towards something, the universe can only respond to that. And I believe that it always does.
Wow. I think that's the perfect closing line to this complete conversation. That was very inspiring and very motivating. I really enjoyed this conversation. Though I'm not from the space industry, but by the time I will complete this series, I think I will become a spacist and space enthusiast by the time we complete this. Thank you so much for your time, and it was indeed a pleasure.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.